They were famous for how they lit up the screen, not how they left it. But these actors died in ways no movie could prepare us for. Sudden, violent, sometimes unspeakable. Behind the glamour was a darkness no one saw coming. He was young, handsome, and just getting started. In 1984, John Eric Hexum had landed a lead role on the CBS show Cover Up. During a break on set, he picked up a prop gun loaded with blanks. Joking around, he held it to his head and pulled the trigger. What he didn't know was that even a blank round fires with deadly force at close range. The blast fractured his skull, driving bone fragments into his brain. Hexum was rushed to the hospital, placed on life support, but never regained consciousness. His mother chose to donate his organs. He was just 26. It wasn't a stunt. It wasn't a scene. It was a tragic accident that silenced a rising star in an instant. In 1969, Sharon Tate was a rising star, a model, actress, and the pregnant wife of director Roman Polanski. She was just 26 when followers of Charles Manson broke into her Hollywood Hills home. What followed was one of the most brutal nights in Hollywood history. Tate, 8 months pregnant, was tied up and stabbed 16 times. She begged them to spare her unborn child. They didn't. Alongside her, 4 others were murdered: celebrity hairstylist Jay Sebring, coffee heiress Abigail Folger, Folger's boyfriend Wojtek Frykowski, and 18-year-old Stephen Parent, who had simply dropped by. The killers wrote "pig" in blood on the door. It wasn't random. It was ritualistic, savage, and meant to terrify. Sharon's death marked a turning point in American culture, the moment the dream of the 60s gave way to something darker. Anton Yelchin had it all: charm, talent, and a growing list of major film roles, including Chekhov in the Star Trek reboot. But on June 19, 2016, tragedy struck in a way no one could have imagined. Yelchin stepped out of his Jeep Grand Cherokee at home when the SUV suddenly rolled backward down his steep driveway. It pinned him against a brick pillar and a security gate, crushing him. He was found dead hours later by friends. The cause? A flawed gear system in the car that had triggered a nationwide recall. Too late for Anton. He was just 27. In one quiet, horrifying moment, the world lost a star who hadn't even begun to shine his brightest. David Carradine was known for playing warriors, from Kung Fu to Kill Bill. But his real-life ending was unlike any role he'd ever taken. In 2009, Carradine was found dead in a Bangkok hotel closet. He was naked, with a cord tied around his neck and genitals, leading to speculation of autoerotic asphyxiation. It was a deeply disturbing scene, clouded in confusion, conflicting reports, and media frenzy. His family initially feared foul play, but the final ruling pointed to accidental death. Carradine was 72. For a man known for control and discipline on screen, his death raised painful questions and left behind a legacy forever tangled in mystery. Sal Mineo made history in Rebel Without a Cause, earning an Oscar nomination at 17. But in real life, his story ended far from the spotlight. In 1976, after returning home from a play rehearsal, Mineo was parking his car in a dark alley behind his apartment. A man approached and stabbed him once in the heart. Sal collapsed, bleeding out on the pavement, just steps from his front door. He was 37. Police first suspected the murder was tied to his sexuality. Sal was openly gay at a time when that made him a target. But years later, a drifter with a long criminal record was arrested, claiming it was a robbery gone wrong. The truth may be known, but the wound it left never really closed. She was more than a bombshell. Jane Mansfield was smart, funny, and one of the biggest stars of the 1950s. But her death in 1967 was shockingly brutal. Late at night, driving with her children and boyfriend on a dark Louisiana highway, their car slammed into the back of a slow-moving truck. The impact sheared off the top of the vehicle. Mansfield, sitting in the front seat, died instantly. Rumors swirled for years about her being decapitated. Not true, but the injuries were severe. Miraculously, her 3 children, asleep in the back seat, survived. One of them? Mariska Hargitay, now a star herself. Jane was just 34 when she died, and her crash led to new safety standards on tractor trailers. Her end was violent, but it helped save countless lives. He was one of the funniest men alive, a Saturday Night Live legend and beloved voice actor on The Simpsons. But in 1998, Phil Hartman's life ended in horror. His wife Bryn had a long history of substance abuse and instability. After an argument late one night, she walked into their bedroom and shot him in his sleep. Their children were home. Hours later, Bryn confessed to a friend, locked herself in the room with Phil's body, and took her own life. The murder-suicide sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Hartman was just 49. His death wasn't just tragic, it was senseless, the brutal fallout of untreated mental illness and addiction. And it silenced a voice that had brought laughter to millions. Susan Cabot starred in cult horror films like The Wasp Woman, but her real-life ending was far more terrifying than anything she played on screen. By the 1980s, Cabot lived reclusively with her son, Timothy, a young man plagued by severe psychological issues. On December 10, 1986, during what he later described as a paranoid episode, Timothy bludgeoned his mother to death with a weightlifting bar while she slept. The scene was horrific. He then called police, admitting to the killing. The court would later determine he suffered from mental illness, and he was sentenced to probation. Susan Cabot was 59. Her death was the kind of violence rarely associated with Hollywood: raw, domestic, and unbearably sad. He made the world laugh for a decade as Chandler Bing on Friends, but behind the quick wit was a man fighting demons. On October 28, 2023, Matthew Perry was found unresponsive in the hot tub of his Los Angeles home. The cause of death? The acute effects of ketamine, with contributing factors including the opioid buprenorphine, which he was using to treat addiction. Drowning was also listed as a secondary cause. It wasn't suicide, but a fatal relapse. Perry had been open about his years of struggle, the hospitalizations, the broken ribs, the near-death moments. He once said he wanted to be remembered not for friends, but for helping people recover. He was 54. Just days earlier, he posted that he felt at peace. His final chapter was silent, but the sadness it left behind echoes loudly. She was only 10 years old, but Judith Barcy had already starred in over 70 commercials, TV shows, and voiced beloved animated characters like Ducky in The Land Before Time. But behind the cameras, her life was filled with terror. Her father, Yosef, was abusive and controlling, with a growing history of violence. On July 25, 1988, after years of threats, he followed through. He shot Judith in the head while she slept, then killed her mother, Maria. Days later, he set their house on fire and took his own life. Judith's murder stunned Hollywood. A talented child star, full of joy and promise, destroyed by the one person who should have protected her. Her gravestone reads, "Our concrete angel," and to this day, her story remains one of the most heartbreaking tragedies in the industry. William Holden was once one of the biggest names in Hollywood, a leading man in films like Sunset Boulevard and Bridge on the River Kwai. But by 1981, he was living alone in Santa Monica, drinking heavily. One night, reportedly intoxicated, he slipped and struck his head on a nightstand. The blow opened a gash above his eye. Disoriented, he didn't seek help. Instead, he bled out slowly over several hours. No one found him for days. He was 63. There was no violence, no foul play, just silence, isolation, and a tragic end for a man once adored by millions. Holden's death was a chilling reminder of how far a Hollywood legend can fall when no one is around to hear. She was a child star turned screen icon with roles in Rebel Without a Cause and West Side Story. But Natalie Wood's life ended in waters darker than any script. In 1981, she was on a weekend boat trip with her husband Robert Wagner and co-star Christopher Walken off the coast of Catalina Island. After an evening of drinking and arguing, Wood disappeared. Hours later, her body was found floating near the boat. She was wearing a flannel nightgown, socks, and a down jacket. The official ruling, accidental drowning, but bruises on her body, conflicting witness statements, and years of unanswered questions kept suspicion alive. The case was reopened in 2011. Wagner was later named a person of interest, but no charges were filed. Natalie was 43. To this day, her death remains one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries, a story with no clear ending. Vic Morrow was known for tough guy roles, but what happened on set in 1982 was beyond anyone's worst nightmare. During the filming of Twilight Zone, the movie, Morrow was shooting a scene with 2 child actors. Helicopters flew low overhead. Pyrotechnics exploded. Then, something went wrong. A rotor clipped one of the explosions, sending the chopper crashing into the actors below. All 3 were killed instantly. Morrow was decapitated. The children, Micah Din Lee, 7, and Renee Shin Chen, 6, died on impact. The accident sparked outrage, lawsuits, and a reckoning in Hollywood over safety standards. Vic Morrow had once said he feared dying in a helicopter crash. He was 53. What was meant to be movie magic became one of the industry's darkest days. She was a silent film beauty, poised for stardom. In 1923, Martha Mansfield was on location in Texas, filming The Warrens of Virginia. During a break, she stepped into a car to rest. That's when tragedy struck. A lit match, possibly from a careless onlooker, landed on her Civil War costume, made of highly flammable fabric. In seconds, she was engulfed in flames. Her co-star and chauffeur tried desperately to save her, tearing away parts of the burning dress. It wasn't enough. Martha suffered severe burns and died the next day in the hospital. She was just 24. Her career was on the rise, her life just beginning, and it ended in fire on the edge of a battlefield scene that became far too real. To millions, he was Superman. But in 1959, George Reeves was found dead in his bedroom from a gunshot wound to the head. The official ruling, suicide. But almost immediately, doubts surfaced. There were no fingerprints on the gun. His fiancée and guests were in the house that night, yet no one claimed to hear the shot until much later. Some believed he'd been murdered. Others blamed his fading career or his messy entanglement with the wife of a powerful studio executive. He was 45. Reeves had once leapt tall buildings in a single bound, but in the end, his death left more questions than answers, and a legend forever clouded by suspicion. Some of these stories are terrifying. Others are just deeply sad. But every one of them reminds us, fame offers no protection from darkness. If you've made it this far, you know these lives deserve to be remembered, not for how they ended, but for everything they gave before. Subscribe if you want more stories like these, and tell me in the comments, which of these endings shook you the most?